Today I'm going to show you how I made the Bellowing Banshee Set, and all of the other effects in that video. Last week was April Fool's, and for April Fool's I made a video called How to Get the Bellowing Banshee Cutlass and Ship Set. That video was entirely fake. I completely made it up. All of the things in it I made in Photoshop or Premiere or After Effects, and basically in this video I'm going to show you how I made that video. So, being said, if you haven't seen that one, I highly suggest you go watch it, because otherwise this is not going to make any sense whatsoever. Alright, so quickly, how this video is going to be structured. I'm going to start with the concept phase, so basically before I sat down to actually do any of the things. So concept, followed by the framework, so like the basic gist of designing the video, followed by the effects in order they happen in the video. All of these will be split up into chapters, so if you want to cut to any of these specifically, there's a chapter for it. I also do want to say I'm not a professional by any means. All of these skills I taught to myself. I'm self-taught. So pretty much all of my information has been from Googling stuff or watching YouTube videos or stuff like that, or my own perceptions. I haven't been taught any of these. That being said, I also want to say I probably could have done a lot of these way more efficiently and better than I did. So if you have any advice for me, I'm all ears. The concept phase. All right, to explain this phase fully, we're gonna have to go back, all the way back to 2020. I just got in Photoshop and After Effects and wanted to try them out. So in March, I decided to make an April Fool's video. And from that idea came the How to Summon the Shrouded Ghost video. In this video, I made a fake voyage that led to spawning the Shrouded Ghost. Very short, 2-minute video. Then the next year, I wanted to outdo myself, make an even cooler video. And then I did. I made the Ancient Beast set, which was a little more in-depth, and I actually added a few cosmetics. This is also where the tinted Spyglass idea came from. Now, this year, I wanted to make something even better that would outdo both of those previous years, both in design and sheer scope. The first problem was coming up with exactly what this video would be about. So I kind of just had this on the back burner for a while. I just kind of occasionally thought about it. I was like, oh hey, what about this idea? Until one night I was lying in bed, couldn't really fall asleep because I had gotten an idea, which I believe was Phantom NPCs, but it was 3 in the morning, so I don't really remember what it was. Anyway, after I kind of thought out quite a bit, I decided that I liked the idea so much I wrote it down. So here is what I wrote on my phone at 3 in the morning. Now, from this original document, I don't have any names because I'm really bad at coming up with names. So we have the Banshee set, we have the Spyglass description being changed, and we have the Shipwreck's nameplate being added. From there, 3 ghosts can be found around the island when looking through the Spyglass. Originally, all 3 of these ghosts had dialogue, but that was later changed. I didn't get very far. I only got to the part where Rainy Robert tells you to follow the Banshee. Now, at this point, the idea was born, and over the next month, I thought about it more and worked out a few more details. But I hadn't actually truly begun work on it. That changed in March. The framework phase. This is basically just the general layout of the video. Now, there's one important thing to know about my workflow. I tend to pick something, work on it until I hit a roadblock, and then either take a break from working or go and work on another thing. So during the framework phase, I did add a few of the effects because I got tired of doing the actual framework. So sometimes there'll be effects in there that are already in there before we get to that effect. Anyway, okay, framework. So the very first thing I did was record a unscripted voiceover for what I wanted the stuff to be. I just recorded my audio, so none of Rainy Roberts or One Eyes. I then went in, watched it back, decided what I liked and decided what I didn't like. I then split the video up into 4 segments. 1, the intro, which is from the very start of the video all the way to Rainy Roberts' chat. The second part was Rainy Roberts' dialogue. The third part was Kraken's fall to Crook's Hollow. And then the 4th part was One Eye's chat. I then decided I didn't like my original audio, so I re-recorded it for the first segment, and then I started blocking in what I wanted to be the visuals. Also, just as reference, anything colored this dark red color is stuff I will get rid of later. It is not intended to be in the video. I just haven't gotten around to replacing it. And then anything in this pinkish color is a placeholder. So that's just to show me I haven't finished the effect here. So for instance, for the Stormchaser Plaque, I just used the video of me looking at where the plaque would be, without the plaque as a placeholder. Now, I started by blocking out this first part by just throwing in all of the placeholder segments and just editing down the audio to where I wanted it. I then went to the third segment and did the same thing, and then I had the basic layout of the video, which means it's on to the most exciting phase, the effects phase. Alright, so let's start with the very first couple seconds of the video. As the video starts, I show you two things, the Bellowing Banshee Cutlass and the Bellowing Banshee Ship Set. We'll just start with the Cutlass first. Now, frankly, I can't make a Cutlass from scratch completely. I do something I call Frankensteining, where I take pieces from pre-existing items and mash them together. First things first, I had to find other cutlasses to steal pieces from. To do this, I headed over to the Sea of Thieves website, where you can download pictures of any items you own with no background. So I then spent a bit perusing my cutlass inventory. Now when I'm selecting candidates for Frankensteining, I'm looking for two components. One, how cool does it look? Because I don't want to use lame pieces to make an item. And two, how recognizable is it? If it's a really well-known item, then people probably recognize it right off the bat. Sea of Thieves may recolor things quite frequently, but they don't take components from one item and mix it with a component from another item. So I gotta make sure that they aren't very recognizable. Now I ended up selecting two cutlasses for this. The Admiral Cutlass, which is a very cheap cutlass that could just be bought from the weaponsmith by default. Since it's cheap and it's not super flashy, I was hoping people wouldn't remember it very well. Then the second cutlass is the Cutlass of Courage. Now, I wanted this one for the blade. Now, this one is from an old arena event, so only older arena players will have this, which I was hoping would make it pretty unrecognizable, especially because I took off its main characteristic of the lion handle. I then chucked these both into Photoshop, chopped the blade off the Admiral Cutlass, chopped the handle off the Cutlass of Courage, and matched them together. You can also see I had a few other cutlasses here, but they didn't make the cut. Then at this point, I decided I wanted to add some skeleton runes to this, because frankly, I really like skeleton runes. So I headed over to the Sea of Thieves Wiki skeleton runes page. On there, they have a list of all the runes and what they mean. I'll leave a link to that in the description because I did actually use these in the video. Now, I threw a few on the sword to just kind of figure out what I wanted it to say. Eventually, it translated to something like, Death from Blade, Ghost Caged for Eternity, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. Death from the blade means your soul, or ghost, will be caged or trapped for eternity, which is what the blade does. So I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, I took these, I just kind of threw them on the blade, and then I messed around with these for a while. At some point, I took this red Stinger Cutlass and then put that underneath the runes, so that showed up as the runes. I then decided I didn't like the yellow swirl thing and took that off. And then eventually I decided I didn't like how the runes looked. And then I spent a while trying to make the runes look good. And I eventually settled on just changing the color of the original blade to a red, and then adding a slight highlight and shadow around the edges of them. Then I changed the colors up a bit and added a slight reddish pink kind of tint to the edge of the blade. After that, I messed around with the handle color for a bit and tried to make the metal match the blade, made the red a little darker, and boom, Banshee Cutlass. Next up is the ship set. Now, this one, I'm not gonna lie, was really tricky. So first, I did kind of the same thing with the Frankensteining. I logged into Sea of Thieves, I equipped cosmetics that weren't recognizable, and looked cool. I ended up settling with the Silent Barnacle Flag, the Collector's Soulflame Sails, the Good Boy Hull, the Thriving Wild Rose Figurehead, and the Boral Aurora Cannons. I then sat around and stared at it for a while, until I was confident that I had good lighting. I then left the game, went to Photoshop, picked a screenshot I liked. Now, I did have a ton of trouble with making this. This was pretty much the very first item I started working on for this video, but it was also the last one to finish. I actually wasn't even sure if this ship set would originally make it into the video, because I think I finished it an hour before the video was scheduled to go up. Now, I started by cutting out the sails and turning them red, because I knew I wanted to make this set kind of a red and white. Then once I made them red, I hid the original big insignias on them, which I thought were the most distinctive feature. So I got rid of the big Soulflame Captain logo and the Soulflame like lanterns. Once those were gone, I tried to figure out a logo to put on the sail myself. At one point, I was thinking about using Flameheart's face from the Embalmed commendation from Seabound Soul. I'm glad I didn't, but I looked at that for a little bit. I then decided I was going to take a break from the sails and went over to the figurehead. Now, after a while, the only thing I did to the figurehead was give it gray hair because I figured that made it a little bit less recognizable from the black it had prior. I also made the hair a little longer. Then I got tired of working on the figurehead and decided to do the hull. I then spent a while masking out the individual colors of the hull to make sure that I didn't change the colors of things I didn't want to. This took a surprising amount of time. Also, the reason the colors are so vibrant or dark here is just so I can see where the effect ends. Then, after I masked out everything I wanted, I spent a little bit messing with the colors. I eventually went with the kind of like bright white and dark reddish pink color, and then I moved back over to the sails and messed with their coloration for quite a while. And this is how it was left until April 1st, when I decided to finally finish it. Now, first things first, I needed to give a logo to the middle. So I went over to the Sea of Thieves wiki and grabbed 2 more skeleton runes. I then merged these 2 runes into the symbol you see here, which is a combination of ghost and ship, so ghost ship, referencing the fact that the ship wasn't actually real. I then added a second one, slightly transparent and glowing red, over top of it, because I thought it added a nice kind of 3D-ness to it. I also colored the flag red, just so it fit a little bit better. Now I moved on to the figurehead, which up until this point had been basically the same figurehead. I decided I wanted to add kind of like this mist, like flowing off of it. So I basically took sheets of white, added a little bit of like transparency variation through it, and then kind of warped those into these kinds of streams. I then turned them a darker color because I thought the white was way too bright, and I faded them out to make them look more like mist. I then added these kind of reddish runes going off the figurehead because I thought it looked neat, and then I added a slight pinkish tinge to the fog. And boom, there we have it, the Bellowing Banshee Ship Set. Alright, now the next effect is about 30 seconds farther into the video, which is the Stormchaser Plaque. First things first, I had to get 2 baseline shots for this. One, I had to get a shot of me staring at this shipwreck for like 30 seconds, and 2, I needed a shot of me staring at a actual ship plaque from the same angle. I eventually decided to go with the Morning Stars ship plaque. I then went into Photoshop, threw a picture of both of them down, and cut out the ship's plaque. Now, once I got the angle right, I ran into a major problem. The Wild's water is a very different color from the Shores of Plenty water. So I spent a while messing around with the colors until I eventually decided to just make it gray and then paint new colors over it. So first I started with the kind of bronze frame, then I went to the barnacles, I made them kind of a barnacle color. Then I added the kind of faded blue color of the actual logo. Then I changed the bone coloration slightly, so there was at least some variance from that to the sign. I then added a tiny bit of green just to make it look a little bit moldy like the original one was. And I even added a few highlights and shadows to it, especially behind it to make it look like it was actually casting a shadow on the hull. Now at this point we had the actual plaque, but we didn't have the name. So I then went into fonts, found a nice font, and wrote Stormchaser in all caps, because that's what Sea of Thieves text normally is. I then tried to make it look cool, which ended up being this, and then I warped it to fit the shape. Once I decided I was happy with it, I went in and covered up the Morning Star text. I then changed the color of the Stormchaser text and kind of erased it partially in a bunch of spots to give it that kind of water-worn look. Then at this point, I decided I quite liked it. I then threw it into the video, and it looked horrible. Now, it doesn't look good because of 3 issues. 1, it doesn't ripple with the water. Sea of Thieves water has a weird kind of like waving effect to give it that kind of, underwater look, which this plaque didn't have because it was a still image. Another issue is the waves, how they moved. The plaque should have gone above the surface of the water several times, about 3. And the third issue is in my original recording of the shipwreck, I was swimming super close to the top of the water, which meant when a wave went up, my character moved slightly upwards and slightly downwards with the waves, which caused another issue. Now, at this point, I couldn't re-record the footage because I had already made the plaque to fit this angle, so I just had to work with it. I then chucked both these clips into After Effects, which is my actual like movie magic program. Now, I started off with my classic method of trying to track it on. Basically, I add something called a tracking node that looks at a certain area of pixels and just follows those pixels. I tried this like 3 or 4 times, but there was a serious issue. That serious issue was the ripple effect from the waves, as that ripple effect would make the specific point I was trying to track go up slightly and down slightly, even though the rest of the ship wasn't actually moving, which caused the plaque to look a little off. After trying this a couple times, I gave up and tried a new method. I started by adding a ripple effect to the Stormchaser Plaque, which worked great. I had to mess around with the settings for a little bit, but overall it turned out pretty cool. Then from there, I decided to hand track the motion of the ship. Basically, I then watched the video, and then whenever my character jumped up and down in the water, I moved the plaque to that point. And then it slowly moved between those 2 points in between there, which actually worked pretty well, and that's what it ended up being in the final product. Then I had to deal with the third issue, the waves. To deal with them, I added what's called a mask. Basically, it's kind of a shape. If the Stormchaser Plaque moves out of that shape, it disappears. I then lined up this shape with the waves, so the waves then moved through the plaque. I then added a second bigger mask behind that was transparent instead. So whenever it was outside of the first mask, but in the second mask, it was almost completely transparent. So that way you could see the Stormchaser Plaque through the waves, so it didn't become invisible after it was above the water. I really hope that makes sense. And with that, we had the Stormchaser Plaque done. Next, we have the Ghost Spyglass. So first things first, I showed off this clip. Now, I took this clip right around when I started working on the video. Then about a week later, I recorded the same shot of just me looking at the Ghost Spyglass. And since this was about a week later, I had more gold and more doubloons, which made it a little more believable that they were in different times. Now here, the change was the description. First, I did what I call patching. I took a screenshot of this, threw it into Photoshop, then I basically made a patch. I covered up the original text in, I think, just black. It was dark enough there that you couldn't tell that I did anything, which then just made it look like it didn't have a description. I then went to the Sea of Thieves website, because the Sea of Thieves website uses the same font as the game does. What I did is basically, if you go to any web page and right click on any text and hit inspect, you can then change what the website says. Now this only changes it on your computer. It doesn't actually mess with the site itself. If you refresh it, it goes back to what it was. It just changes it on your end. So you can change the text to say anything you want. So basically, I just changed the text to say, they say this spyglass lets you see the dead, but just know if you can see them, they can see you. That's all I did. I changed this to that. I then took a screenshot of that, threw it into Photoshop, cut out the letters, and put it here. The one issue was the fact that the font on the website was a little bit thinner than the font in the game, so I had to account for that by adding a convenient cut in between the 2 spyglass pictures. Basically, I just moved the first clip, so I went out of the equipment box before it cut. That way it was less obvious that the fonts were different sizes. Then it cuts to another shot where I just look into the spyglass and see that it's green. All I did here was add a color correction layer when I'm looking through the spyglass to change the color. Nothing fancy there. Next up, we have the Phantom NPCs. For this, I needed a few extras. Basically, I just needed a few people whose character models you guys wouldn't recognize. Now, I wasn't 100% sure you'd recognize any of the character models I used, so either mine or any of my friends. Just to be on the safe side, I went and got people who had never been in any of my videos before. Specifically, 3 of my Twitch followers, Duck, Norge, and Tron, who are awesome, by the way. You guys are awesome. Thanks for helping me out with this. Now, they all agreed to help me out, and basically, one at a time, I hopped into Sea of Thieves with them. We went to Shipwreck Bay, and I recorded a few shots with each of them. Basically, they went to where I told them to be, and I sat in a place with the spyglass, looked into the spyglass at them, looked out of the spyglass, back and forth from probably 3 or 4 different angles with each of them. Later, I went to the exact same spot without them at roughly the same time of day, stood in the exact same spot, went to the spyglass, went out, went in, went out in the same view. I then threw both of those clips into editing. I started with the shot of no one being there, then the frame the Spyglass swaps in, I cut it and swap it with the video clip of the Phantom or Twitch follower being there. I then also added the greenish tint over top of that to make it look different. Now, I did this several times and I actually think it turned out really well. Alright, next we're going to talk about one of the most important parts of the entire video, the talk with Rainy Robert. Now, there's three major components to this. First, the Phantom effect, where you look at the Spyglass and you can see Tron. I already explained how I did this effect. The only difference is I had Tron talk in voice chat for a second, so their mouth moved, and then I tried to line that up with my talking. The second thing is the actual voice of Rainy Robert. That is actually my unedited voice. The only thing I did to the voice there is double layered it so it had a slight echo. But that is actually my voice. Fun fact about me, I play Dungeons & Dragons. Now, when I play Dungeons & Dragons, I like to change my voice from character to character, so it's obvious when I'm talking as me, the player, or as my character in the game. So I've grown accustomed to changing my voice pretty drastically. So it wasn't actually super hard to make my voice that different. Now, the difficult part was actually making my voice sound enough not like me, but also enough like an actual person, which was where I struggled. Now, there were actually 3 drafts for Rainy Robert's dialogue. His first draft, which sounded way too much like me, here it is. It's so nice to speak with someone again. It's just been me and my crew here for days, or maybe weeks. Anyway, they aren't much for talking these days. The second draft, where I just made the voice like way higher, and I just eventually decided it did not fit the character. It's so nice to speak with someone again. It's just been me and my crew here for days, or maybe weeks. And the third and final draft, which is what made it into the video. It's so nice to speak with someone again. It's just been me and my crew here for days, or maybe weeks. Anyway, they aren't much for talking these days. Now, once I had the dialogue, we had to get the kind of voice block. To do this, I went into Sea of Thieves, launched the Shroudbreaker Telltale, and recorded my screen, and then took a screenshot of what the dialogue box looked like. I then spent a really long time messing with the colors to make it look right and trying to get it out and be see-through in parts, and that took an embarrassingly long time to do. Probably spent like an hour trying to figure that out. Anyway, once I finally got the bubble out and I was happy with it, I added the text. Now, again, I stole the text from the Sea of Thieves website. Same font, it's great. And I started by copying over 3 things. 1, Captain Rainy Robert. 2, Captain One-Eye. And 3, Captain One-Eye Wither, which I never actually ended up using. I then colored all of this text the kind of goldish orange of the title for the person. And once I had these templates, I then watched the video, got a block of dialogue that I thought was a good amount to throw into these blocks of text. I then wrote that into the Sea of Thieves website, getting the text out the exact same way I got the Spyglass text out, threw it in, and then I did that for every single individual line of text, which took me probably 3 hours, which is way longer than I thought it would. Anyway, once I finally had that all done, I threw it all into the editing and just swapped them out at the appropriate time. Also, at the very start, I added a fade in and fade out, which I tried to copy off of the original fade in and fade out when you started the Telltale. And with that, Rainy Robert's dialogue was finally done. Also, quick fun fact about Rainy Robert. I was having trouble coming up with a name for that character, so Tron actually gave me the name Rainy Robert, which also led to me naming the Stormchaser the Stormchaser. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of cool. Now, immediately after Rainy Robert's talk, there was originally going to be another effect here that I chopped out later, but I did make the assets for it, so I wanted to show them off. Basically, I made this, which is essentially a recolored version of the original adventure launch banner, except I made it green, and I changed it to the Blight of the Banshee, because that's what I named the adventure. Originally, this was going to come in right after Rainy Robert's talk, and I made it for that, but I eventually scrapped it due to time, and also I didn't have music to go along with it, and it would have been weird without music. The next major effect is what I call the Glint. Basically, when I walk into this cave and you see the Glint over here. Now, first things first, I needed my basic footage. So I ran from this point into the thing, pulled this lever and the skeleton lowered, then turned around, jumped up at the skeleton, landed, and then stared blankly at the wall. Now, I didn't make this skeleton. The skeleton and the lever and stuff are actually remnants from the Fate of the Morningstar tall tale. Anyway, so now there's 3 different things happening here. There's the glint, so the little shiny sparkle. There's the F to pick up Banshee's letter, and there's the Banshee's letter received. First things first, I had to figure out what a glint actually looked like. So I went to the sea forts and recorded footage of the storeroom key and the jailer's key, and a collector's chest. I then deemed that 3 important things made up a glint. 1, the spinning little like kind of just beams of light in the center, the kind of like larger circles of light around it, and the fact that it fades, like it dims and then brightens periodically. These are 3 things I need to replicate. First, I went to Photoshop and made the kind of like star, so like the bright point in the middle, followed by the starbursts around it. I then went into After Effects and tracked the skeleton's hand. Basically, through a tracking node that paid attention to the pixels on the skeleton's hand and just watched them throughout the video. I then attached the glint to that, which looked decent. Then I made the glint spin, and then I threw on these background lights to make it bigger and brighter. I then made all 3 of these fade and brighten, fade, brighten while they were doing this. Basically all there is to the glint effect. Then I had to make the F to pick up Banshee's letter. This was really simple. I just took this image, cut it out, and changed the text. Same website stealing text trick. And slapped it on here for a few seconds. And the final effect here is the Banshee's letter received. Now, for this, I actually went back into my files and found footage of me playing the Revenge of the Morningstar tall tale. And in this tall tale, there's a skeleton captain, and when you kill them, they drop these orders. And when you pick up these orders, you get this notification. The page is added to tall tale. Now from here, I got rid of the text and the little background image, changed the text to Banshee's letter received, same text stealing trick. I then took another asset I made earlier, which was basically the same notification, but I just wanted the left bit, so I just chopped it up, and then got rid of the cutlass and replaced it with the orders that I cut out from earlier in this site. I then added the ghost ships from one of the Order of Souls ghost ship commendations to make it look a little more believable. Now, I do want to also just add here, originally there was going to be an effect where I held up the letter, but I ended up scrapping it for time reasons. But I did actually make a cutout of the letter, so this is what it was going to look like. Honestly, the main problem was I didn't have a font to put the letter in. Just want to say that because I thought it was a cool idea, just didn't make it in. And next we cut to Crook's Hollow. And it starts with me running into this cave, hearing the ominous music. Now, for this, I recorded me running into the cave, stopping abruptly and looking around. There was no music originally. I then later recorded me going into the cave for Out of a Trickster and got this wonderful audio. Which I then threw over top to line up with me freaking out. I then continued into the cave and literally copy and pasted my glint effect from earlier to add the glint, except I made it slightly pinkish. Now the next and final effect pretty much is Captain One Eye. Now, Captain One Eye is pretty much the same. I used the same dialogue bubble template I made earlier, same way of getting the dialogue, and it's just my voice again. And all I did to it was add a reverb effect to make it sound like it was echoing from farther down the cave. So this is the exact same effect as Rainy Robert. Now, the next and final effect of the entire video is the congratulations. By finishing this video, you have earned the April Fool title. This was super straightforward. Basically, I took the same image I used for the Banshee's letter, got rid of the text, replaced it with this, which I took from the website, like I took all the other text from the website, and then threw the cutlass on top, just because I thought it looked cool. And with that, you now know how I made the Bellowing Banshee set and accompanying video. So that should be pretty much everything. I hope I answered all your questions. If you have any additional questions that I didn't cover in this video, if you want to leave those in the comments, I will try to answer them as soon as I can. And also, if you have any advice on anything I could do better in this, so anything with the video effects, the voice acting, photoshopping, any of it, that would be greatly appreciated if you want to just leave those in the comments too. I'm always trying to improve with these things, hence the yearly challenge. Anyway, we'll be back to regular uploads as of next week, which is just normal Sea of Thieves guides for whatever it is. If that sounds like something that would be interesting to you, if you want to subscribe, it's right down there. It'd be greatly appreciated. Also, if you enjoyed this video, if you wanted to leave a like, that would be also greatly appreciated. It helps a ton with the algorithm. And I really hope this video wasn't crazy long, because I've been recording voiceovers for an hour and 40 minutes. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you. Seriously, thank you for the support, and thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. And I will hopefully see you next week. Bye.